I've had an issue with recruitment for over 26 years. When I was asked as an intern as part of my degree to sift through 50 CVs and shortlist candidates to replace myself in my role as I was going back to my studies. The process was completely disorganized. It was just an arbitrary selection based on pure subjectivity. There was no logic or reasoning behind the decisions that were being made. Yes, we could look at their qualifications and their grades and what they'd done in the past, but it was all up to me to make the decision. There was no way of comparing like for like. It was purely down to my gut feeling about who should replace me in my role. That was when it all started. And when I became an entrepreneur, my dislike turned into more of a hatred, to more of a complete aversion to having to do any recruitment at all. However, if you're a business owner, you'll know to run a business and have a life, you need to hire people, even if that's just one virtual assistant to help you in the day-to-day running of your business. Having somebody is essential for you to take true time off. Unless you have a business, you can literally just switch off and on again at will, which many of us don't. So if you're interested to know how I overcame the challenges of my hatred for recruitment and use that to actually motivate me to create an awesome system driven by AI, run by virtual assistants, that allows me and my clients to hire people at will and hire brilliant people at that, then keep listening to this episode. And at the end, I'm going to share an exclusive link so you can actually jump on a bootcamp to get guided step by step through the entire recruitment process. Listen in for more details. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools, and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success. Okay, so in the intro, I mentioned that I've had an issue with recruitment for over 2.5 decades. That issue has grown over the years to be somewhat of a hatred of the entire process. However, that hatred has fueled me to put a considerable time and effort into designing a process that does not rely on human subjectivity in order to find brilliant people. You see, my journey into the world of recruitment started out when I was tasked with hiring my own replacement in my university sandwich degree. And I was asked to go through 50 odd CVs and try and cherry pick out just a few who would be then shortlisted for an interview. I then worked in my own property business where I was renovating properties and I was trying to hire people to help me do the work. That was an absolute nightmare. I ended up just relying on friends and people I knew to basically come down and help when I could. And I used to buy them beers or lunches, whatever, to pay them. I had a few people that did hang around for a bit, but they were all mates or mates of mates or mates of my brothers, or there was always a link to them. But that in itself caused problems because then there's a relationship thing. And if people don't show up for work, it's difficult to sack them and all the rest of it. So it becomes really messy really quickly. But finding people that you don't know to do the work is equally as unreliable. And then in my mid-20s, I co-founded a recruitment company with one of my best mates. And she had an experience in working recruitment in the past, and I had an experience of, well, not a lot really, except for running businesses. And so I came along with a bit of cash and a bit of motivation to try to get this business going with her. I saw how hard she worked to try to find just one person to place with one of our clients. It was just a relentless, never-ending, on the phone, calling people, checking people out, emailing people, checking over CVs, checking over references. It was painful to say the least. And it was incredibly time consuming. That business unfortunately folded because we just didn't have the resources to be able to keep it going long enough to make it profitable. And we just didn't know enough about business, I don't think, to make that work at that time. And then when I became a doctor, I saw a different side of recruitment where I was the one applying for the jobs. And I realized how broken the system was yet again. You see, when I was applying for a place at a hospital, I would draft my CV and I would give it to someone who knew how to write CVs, and they would make it sound good. They would make everything I'd done sound to be 10 times better than it was. However wrong that may sound, that is the way that most CVs are written, or most good CVs are written. They're written by people who know how to write CVs, CV copywriters. Now, with the world of AI, you don't need to pay someone lots of money to do that. You can get AI to do it you for free. So that's opened up the playing field for everybody to basically make stuff up and stick it on their CV, but make it out to sound like it's actually true. And yes, it may be founded in truth and it may not be actually lying, so to speak, but it can be very misleading if it's worded in the ways that they often are and leads you to think that someone has confidence and ability beyond their actual means. And therefore, you can waste huge amounts of time on taking someone through a recruitment process and interviewing them and even hiring them, only to find out they can't actually do everything they said they could do. And it was all down to their ChatGPT bot or whatever AI they happened to be using, who thought they'd jazz up their CV and make it sound good. And then finally, when I got back into the world of entrepreneurship, when I left medicine, I started building a team. I started going through an agency and using a block of hours where I'd basically pay for like 10 hours a month and then have somebody who would then do some tasks for me. That didn't work because I didn't know who I was working with. There was no continuity. I was basically having no relationship with this person. So there was no trust, and therefore it just basically fell down really quickly. I then tried to hire someone myself by cherry picking on Upwork. I put a job advert up. I got some people that applied. I looked at their resumes, looked at their reviews and said, that one sounds good. I'll go with that. That didn't work out either because, again, there was no process involved. It was just me just trusting other people's opinions, which may or may not be true, and seeing what someone had written on their CV and saying, yeah, she sounds like a good fit. Let's give it a go. The problem is the cost of just giving it a go is huge. We invest a massive amount of time, not only in the recruitment process, but also in the onboarding process, the training process, and the ongoing support and nurturing of that person so they become a valuable team player. If we pick wrong at the beginning, then it means that we put all of that effort into the wrong person who inevitably leaves, and therefore the entire effort is wasted. If we're not careful, we can do that a few times, end up feeling completely disillusioned about the whole recruitment process in general, and then think, right, great, I'll go to a recruitment agency and they will solve my problems for me. The problem with that is you're then offloading one of the most important activities in your business to somebody else to deal with. And okay, I'll argue that if you want to hire a specialist, if you want to have someone with a specific skill set that you don't have the understanding of or the capability to be able to know how to hire that kind of person, maybe a programmer, a web developer, a web designer, a video editor, someone with that special sort of sauce that you need, but you don't know how to start, then fair enough, maybe an agency can help you. But if you're just hiring someone to be a virtual assistant, a personal assistant, an executive assistant, an admin assistant, anything with an assistant on the end, anything where it's not somebody who's coming in and bringing massive amounts of skill, and therefore you want someone with years of experience that can be, proven, then that is where you, I believe, as a business owner, can easily do the recruitment better than anybody else. You can hire the right person specifically for the job you want, and in a lot less time often than it takes to go through an agency, and for a lot less money. And that is key, because if you remove the barriers from hiring, then you stop hanging on to people for longer than you should. Let me explain that in a little more detail. So one thing I did early on in my journey into entrepreneurship was I got somebody to hire somebody for me. So I paid them a fee and then they hired somebody for me. That was pretty good, and they found someone that was actually of a decent standard. So I had nothing against the process. It was relatively painless. I just had to provide some information about the role, etc. And ultimately I got somebody in the business and they lasted for a few months. However, I had no idea how that person had been found. When that person then inevitably left, I had no way to replace them. And I was then forced a decision, well, do I go back to that agency and ask them to do it again? Because that person actually left after a few months and it was sort of out of the guarantee period, which is fair enough. There's no complaint with the agency. But it meant I now had to think about putting my hand in my pocket to pay for something else again, which may not work out. And that put barriers up to me actually just going ahead and hiring somebody new. And I've also experienced and seen the situation in my clients many times when they hang on to people for too long because they're worried about the cost and effort of going through recruitment. But when we give them our entire recruitment system, which can be run by your virtual assistant or anyone in your team, and is driven and powered by AI to make it super easy and slick to go through, then the barriers are dropped and you can grow your team whenever you need to. And over the years, we've developed our recruitment system so we can hire things like graphic designers and web developers because we can build specific recruitment paths for different types of people. We've had hundreds of more clients that have used the system to hire people from all over the world. Now, how the system works is fundamentally pretty simple, but it's the detail that matters. It's having everything lined up. It's having it so it's effortless to do, that you can delegate this to anybody to do, that you as the business owner, if you're a small business or micro business, you make the decisions up front that allow someone to then do all of the work beyond that until the point where you do your final interviews. And that's when I recommend you get back involved. And having this process, which involves initiating or preparing for the hiring, it involves attracting the right people, eliminating the wrong people, testing the rest, and then selecting the finest. And those 4-5 stages allow us to go from any number of applicants down to a short list of 2 or 3 for live interview in a short space of time, as little as 3 to 4 weeks. It also allows us to do this consistently and regardless of who is in the role. It's a very structured approach that makes it work. So for example, imagine you were applying for a job in like a big firm, whether it's an accountancy firm or whatever in the city. You're not going to just literally hand your CV into the front desk and say, great, let me know if I've got the job. You go through a series of tests. You'll start off probably with some sort of application form. You'll then do some sort of test task to show you've got some ability. You'll hand in some proof of your work. You may then come in for a group interview, a final interview, etc., etc. There's these hoops you need to jump through, and each hoop gets harder to actually get through until you become that shortlist of that final interview. And then obviously you're up against the best of the best of that recruitment drive. And that's what we want in your micro or small business as well. We want to make it difficult to people to apply, but we also want to make it really attractive. You need to set your company out from every other job advert out there, making it stand out to be the one that's different, the one that actually speaks to that person. In the same way that you speak to an individual when you're selling your services, let's speak to the individual when you're selling your business in terms of somewhere that people want to work. Then we take them through those step-by-step stages until we get to that final elimination. And it's a step-by-step approach, having really structured application forms, structured test tasks, everything that we can grade it objectively, removing all subjectivity, not looking at a CV, not looking at a covering letter. Maybe at the end, when we're actually at the point of hiring them, we'll use that just to make sure they haven't made anything else up during the process. So cross-reference what they've said in their application versus what their CV is. But that's about it, because I want to use a standardized process to make sure I've asked all the key questions I need to be able to make a judgment. What they put in their CV is irrelevant to me as a recruiter for my business and for my clients as well, because we ask everything we need to make that objective decision that allows us then to have a final shortlist of people who then we can add that subjectivity about, like, who would I like to work with? Who's going to be a good fit for the team? Who do I think shares my values? That's the kind of stuff that we dig out on that final interview, because everything else has been covered by the step-by-step standardized objective process, going from application all the way through to final selection. So if you'd like to understand more about this and actually get handheld through this entire process, it takes around 4 to 5 weeks to go through, including the preliminary stuff to get you set up and ready so you know exactly who you need to hire. And in the next few weeks, we literally walk through the entire process in real time. So hiring as you go through this process. So the end of that 4 or 5 weeks, you will literally have a new person hired and ready to work in your business. That's the intention of the workshop. If you choose not to do it live and just come along and learn how to do it, that's also fine too. If you're interested, head over to sys.academy/recruit to find out more. And to be clear, this is a paid workshop, so there will be a fee for this. And you'll find all the details of the pricing, the schedule, etc. on that page. So go and check it out, sys.academy/recruit. That's sys.academy/recruit. You can find out all about our recruitment challenge on there. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story and the reasons why behind me putting so much time and effort into creating a fully systemized, VA-driven and AI-powered recruitment process. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you on our recruitment challenge, where you can actually go through this entire system yourself. Head over to sys.academy/recruit to find out more. Thank you very much. Bye now.